At the end of February 2024, national delegates from almost 200 countries gathered for the Sixth Environment Assembly of the United Nations. And among the stakeholders, a prominent position was held by representatives of younger generations who are playing an increasingly prominent role in environmental negotiations, finally. Asil Abutaleb is a member of the Global Steering Committee of the Children and Youth Major Group at the United Nations Environment Programme and the Chemicals and Waste and Pollution Focal Point for Youth at UNEP, and is now the right person for explaining to us the role of youth in environmental policy processes. So, hello, Asil. Thank you for taking the time for being on ILBO Live.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you for hosting.
So Azil, I'd like to ask you first if you can very briefly summarize what are the roles that are covered by the Children and Youth Major Group in multilateral environmental negotiations in these past years.
Yeah, well, the Children and Youth Major Group is one of the 9 major groups of major groups and stakeholders that is formalizing the stakeholders and the civil society participation at the United Nations Environment Assembly and its subsidiary bodies. So in short, CYMG is the formal mechanism of engaging youth and young people in these processes. So the CYMG has so far more than 6,000 youth and children members and over 900 member organizations, both accredited formally to UNEP and also those who are not yet accredited. And the challenge is usually youth will face it challenging to get into this domain of multilateral governance and the work of the negotiations and the policy making processes. So CYMG is providing the platform for those who doesn't have the access by facilitating accreditation with our accredited organizations and also to take part of these important as well as working on building capacities and working on the policy aspects of preparing the youth positions priorities prior to each processes and also being active in the negotiations rooms and the contact groups and trying to advocate for the priorities that we have been working on collecting from all the youth, highlighting the we will further explore that later, but highlighting on the importance of the inclusion of young people in the policy making processes and incorporating intergenerational equity in the process, etc. But yeah, in a nutshell, CYMG is facilitating the engagement of children and youth to UNEP and UNEA.
And the major group gathered in Nairobi right before the start of UNEA, the sixth UNEA, that is the UN Environment Assembly, in a global youth environment assembly, right? And so I would like to ask you, as you were there in person, what are the main outcomes that came out of that meeting? And has it been useful for you, young delegates, for the preparation of the larger UN Assembly where you were present, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So the Global Youth Environment Assembly was a very critical milestone that we achieved prior to the open-ended working group of the Committee of Permanent Representative or OECPR, and then the following week of the UNEA. But I'll start a bit earlier because our youth preparation started in December, where the resolutions to be negotiated started to be in the platform to be announced by the proponents member states. So starting of December, specifically the last week of December, moving forward to February, to prior to the Global Youth Environment Assembly, we started to hold an informal youth consultations for every single resolutions, meaning that we announced that in our social media and among our members and the mailing lists to start building up a position for every single resolutions. There were around 20 draft resolutions and decisions to start with, and then we started to collect inputs. And moving forward, we had two rounds of consultations among youth to prepare the positions. And among this process, we also had rounds of consultations to build up a global declaration on environment, and that also took place in multiple online segments. And then the Global Youth Environment Assembly, uh, in its second version, the first one was in 2022, preceding the UNEA 5.2, and now this is the second version, was for the first time in person in the United Nations office in Nairobi, in UNEP headquarters. So the weekend before OECPR, we had managed to get over 451 youth and children delegates, also invited speakers from multiple UN agencies and member states delegates were there also. So through 2 days of assembly, we had over 17 technical sessions covering the most important processes that's going on in forming and building capacity, and also fostering dialogue and discussions. We also had our final round of consultations for the Global Youth Declaration on Environment that took place hybrid. We also had the final rounds of negotiations to finalize the youth position in person. So yeah, it was very critical for those who are participating in UNEA for the first time or new to the UNEA processes, and but also it provided a space for youth from following different processes and different multilateral agreements, and it was very important to have it right before, and then that was reflected and can be seen in the impact that we received moving forward. Yeah.
That is very interesting. And you mentioned the global declaration that was like one of the main outcomes of that youth assembly, right? And among the many topics that you touch upon in that declaration, um, you declare your positions on several topics and your demands for government and intergovernmental institutions. Among these, one that I found very important is the intergenerational equity, intergenerational justice, and and youth representation among institutions. So I would like to ask you, what are, from the youth perspective, the steps that both national and international institutions should undertake for giving youth more representation in this environmental processes?
Yeah. So speaking on the Global Youth Declaration, well, the declaration calls on UNEP, UNEA, and also member states to to first institutionalize the principle of intergenerational equity in environmental governance, and this is the broader demand and policy asks that we were trying to incorporate through all the processes, through all the contact group and negotiation rooms, informals, even at early night, around 2 a.m., we had youth intervening in the rooms to also emphasize on that early morning. You know, we spread over all the possible ways of engagement, having a strong base of youth from different perspectives, different expertise in the ground, and that was very seen, well received, and in some occasions incorporated into the negotiation. So an institutionalization of the term and of these principles is very essential. Also giving institutionalization for the Youth Environment Assembly as part of UNEA is very crucial. This time, one of the achievements and or the success, I would say, is that the Global Youth Declaration was formally recognized during the opening of UNEA, the closing, the opening of the open-ended working group of the CPR by the UNEP executive director, by member states. Also, member states we're reflecting on our demands and also mentioning the importance of incorporating intergenerational equity, not to mention, but quite several interventions during the plenary where we're referring to the gathering that we had, the youth demands, the youth voice. So that was a very critical point. But also, as part of our asks, we were also asking to develop systematic policy solutions informed by the science. And when we talk about best available science and the scientific assessments and the science policy interfaces, we also have been highlighting the importance of including young people in these panels, in these dialogues, in when it comes to the national implementations and national action plans. The young people presence is very important. We were also trying to highlight that young people, youth, children are very. I know they're very vocal activists, but they are scientists, early career professionals, experts, and they have the expertise and the technologies, literacy that can support them to take part of such processes. And yeah, that's the main things that we were trying to advocate for, but also not to mess. We were um, always trying to incorporate the mentioning of the vulnerable communities, like groups at risk or in vulnerable situations into the policy making processes and the different resolutions we had, among other lists of demands and policy asks we were working on the ground for.